I am Eleanor Cooper, a 28-year-old botanical artist. 8 months ago, I almost lost my life in a massive explosion. And when I woke up in the hospital ICU and asked my parents for help, they said something to me that I will never forget for the rest of my life. That night, my beautiful glass greenhouse burned to ashes. I lost my entire business, my life's work, and my rare flowers in a matter of minutes. When I called my parents from my hospital bed, desperate and broken, my stepfather said words I'll never forget. "We are not paying those bills. You are on your own." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came hours later when a billing investigator told me someone had secretly forged my signature to make my parents the sole beneficiaries of my sick grandma's $500,000 life-saving medical fund. And the very next morning, a forensic arson specialist showed me a broken gas valve and asked me one simple question that changed everything. Who had access to your greenhouse last week? I knew the exact answer. My mother had visited for the first time in 3 years to look at the orchids. Before I continue, please like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight and what time is it there? My lungs were on absolute fire. The memory of the greenhouse glass raining down like sharp, glittering knives was still tearing through my mind. The sharp, chemical smell of hospital bleach woke me up. It was a harsh, stinging scent, so completely different from the rich, damp soil and sweet jasmine I was used to breathing every day. I tried to open my eyes, but the bright white fluorescent lights felt like needles pushing directly into my brain. My throat was as dry as sand, and a heavy foretube was strapped tightly to my bruised arm. My bandaged chest burned with every small, shallow breath. I was in the intensive care unit. My mind was fuzzy, swimming in heavy painkillers, but the terrifying memory of last night hit me like a speeding train. I am a botanical illustrator and florist. I know how things grow, and I know exactly how easily delicate things can die. I was working late at my glass greenhouse studio at 8:30 p.m. I was just finishing a sketch of a rare ghost orchid when the heavy propane heater in the back suddenly exploded. It wasn't a small pop, it was a deafening roar. The fire ate through my beautiful orchids and heavy wooden tables in a matter of seconds. I remember the terrifying sound of the glass shattering outward, the thick black smoke suddenly choking my lungs, and then, total, crushing darkness. A kind, soft-spoken nurse noticed my eyes fluttering open. She stepped forward, her rubber shoes squeaking softly on the perfectly clean floor, and handed me a heavy hospital phone. "Your cell phone melted in the fire, sweetie," she said softly, her eyes full of deep pity. "Do you want to call your family?" Family. The word felt like a lifeline. My hands shook violently as I dialed my mother's familiar number. Pamela, my mother, was a struggling real estate agent who cared much more about wealthy appearances than reality. My stepfather, Robert, was a bankrupt investment broker who hid his massive debts behind expensive suits. They had their deep flaws, and we had drifted apart over the years, but they were still my parents. I still remembered how Mom used to gently brush my hair when I had a bad fever as a little girl. I truly believed they would drop everything and rush to save me. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. Every single second felt like a heavy hour trapping me in that cold bed. Finally, the line clicked open. "Mom?" My voice was just a raspy, broken whisper. It physically hurt to speak. "Hello?" Pamela's voice came through, but it wasn't panicked, it wasn't worried, it was smooth and perfectly calm. "Mom, it's Eleanor. There was an explosion at the greenhouse. I am in the hospital ICU. I am hurt very badly." There was a long, freezing silence on the other end. I strained to hear her breathing. Instead, I heard the loud, cheerful sound of a TV playing a late-night comedy show in the background. A fake laugh track played over the speaker while I lay there fighting for every breath. "Eleanor," my mother finally said. Her tone wasn't filled with a mother's terror. It was heavy with extreme annoyance. She sighed deeply, as if I had just interrupted her favorite scene. "Do you have any idea how much an ICU costs? We told you that silly art business was a joke. You have no real money." "Mom, please," I choked out. A hot tear rolled down my cheek, stinging my soot-covered skin. "I'm scared." I heard a sudden shuffle on the phone. Someone grabbed the receiver roughly. "Listen carefully, Eleanor," Robert muttered. His voice was sharp, cold, and entirely empty of love. "We are not paying those massive hospital bills. You ruined your own studio with your carelessness. You are on your own." Click. The line went totally dead. I stared at the plastic phone in my trembling hand. My heart didn't just break, it completely shattered. I had spent my entire life studying plants, learning that even the most damaged roots will try to seek out water to survive. But my own roots had just cut me off. The medical monitors around me suddenly started beeping wildly. My heart rate was spiking in pure naked panic. I couldn't breathe. I was completely alone. Just then, the heavy wooden door pushed open. A tall man in a crisp white coat walked in. He was the chief surgeon. "Calm down, Miss Cooper," he said gently, checking the glowing digital chart at the end of my bed. "I see your heart rate is elevated. Are you worried about the medical bills? Because you don't need to be." I looked at him through my tears, completely confused. "But my parents just said—" "Your parents didn't bring you here," the surgeon explained, his voice low and serious as he stepped closer. "Do you have any idea who airlifted you into this private, secure VIP ward last night?" My breath caught in my burning throat. I shook my head slowly, my mind spinning through the heavy fog of painkillers. I don't know." The surgeon looked down at the official hospital logs on his tablet. "A woman named Beatrice. She paid for your emergency lung surgery in full, up front. She demanded you be put in our safest, most secure room." My breath stopped in my throat. Great Aunt Beatrice. She was my beloved Grandma Rose's younger sister. My grandmother was currently very sick, resting in a quiet nursing home, and Great Aunt Beatrice was the only person who visited her regularly. Years ago, my mother had furiously banished Aunt Beatrice from the family. Why? Because Beatrice had politely refused to give my parents a massive cash loan for one of Robert's bad business deals. I always loved Aunt Beatrice. I remembered her warm, safe hugs and the comforting way she always smelled like sweet peppermint and old books. But I was forced to stay away from her to keep the peace in my parents' house. Yet, she was the one who had stepped out of the shadows to save my life, right at the exact moment my own parents threw me away like garbage. A heavy, emotional tear slipped down my face. The contrast was physically painful. The people whose blood ran through my veins wanted nothing to do with me, but the aunt I hadn't spoken to in years had just saved my life. A few hours passed. The hospital grew eerily quiet as the night shift took over. The only sound was the steady, rhythmic beep of my heart monitor. Suddenly, a shadow fell over the small window of my door. A man knocked once, very softly. He didn't wait for an answer. He slipped inside the room with quick, nervous steps and immediately locked the heavy door behind him. It was Grant. He wore a rumpled gray suit, but he wasn't a standard hospital visitor. His ID badge said Hospital Billing Investigator. He looked terrified, tightly gripping a thick red folder to his chest. His eyes darted toward the window blinds, checking for anyone watching. "I shouldn't even be showing you this," Grant whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "It could cost me my job, but something is terribly, terribly wrong." "What is it?" I asked, my voice weak but laced with a new, sharp fear. Grant pulled his chair close to my bed. His eyes were filled with deep pity. "Miss Cooper, I am so sorry to bother you right now, but our hospital's financial system flagged something highly suspicious. Tell me, are Robert and Pamela Cooper the primary beneficiaries on your life insurance?" "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "My small life insurance policy is only meant to pay for my sick Grandma Rose's medical care if I die. It goes directly to her nursing home trust." Grant sighed heavily, running a shaking hand through his hair. He opened the red folder. "Miss Cooper, someone came into our partner office exactly 6 days ago. They secretly changed the legal paperwork. If you had died in that terrible fire last night, your parents would have instantly received $500,000. I stared blankly at the white acoustic tiles on the ceiling. My heart turned to solid ice. 6 days ago. My mother had visited my greenhouse exactly 6 days ago. It was her first visit in 3 long years. She claimed she just wanted to look at the new orchids. But she wasn't looking at my flowers. She was looking at the layout of the building. She was looking at a way to get rich. Before I could fully process the horror of this, the heavy doorknob suddenly rattled. Grant's pale face went entirely white. He shoved the red folder under my blanket. "I have to go. They absolutely cannot see me in here with you," he hissed, backing away. He slipped out the side emergency exit just as the main door swung open. Justin Parker walked quietly into my room. He was the hospital security manager, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a warm, reassuring smile. Even though he wore a crisp security uniform, He always smelled faintly of fresh pine needles and crisp outdoor air. It was a comforting smell that grounded me. "Eleanor, are you okay?" Justin asked softly. His trained eyes immediately noticed my pale, terrified face and the way my hands were gripping the bedsheets. I couldn't speak. I just slowly pulled the thick red folder out from under the blanket and handed it to him. "My parents," I choked out, a sharp pang of guilt and horror hitting my chest at the same time. "They forged my signature, Justin. They tried to steal Grandma Rose's life-saving medical fund." Justin's warm smile completely vanished. His jaw tightened as he scanned the documents. His posture shifted from a friendly visitor to a highly trained security professional in an instant. I closed my eyes tightly. Part of me, the little girl inside, still desperately wanted to believe my mother was innocent. I remembered how Mom used to bake me warm chocolate chip cookies whenever I had a bad fever. How could a mother who did that suddenly want her own daughter dead for a paycheck? Justin frowned deeply. He reached down as his walkie-talkie crackled sharply on his thick black belt. He turned the volume down. "Eleanor, this is a major federal felony. The hospital's legal team is already looking into this forgery flag. But listen to me very carefully. You are not safe in this building if your parents find out you are still alive. If you are feeling the tension building, please hit the like button and let me know in the comments. What would you do if you found out your own family betrayed you for money?" The long night finally faded into a gray, rainy morning. I barely slept. Every shadow in the room felt like a threat. At 9 a.m., the door to my room opened again. This time it was a man named Mitchell West. He wasn't a standard police officer. His badge read Forensic Arson Specialist. He had deep, tired wrinkles carved into his forehead and the intense, calculating eyes of a man who spent his life sifting through tragedies. He carried a clear plastic evidence bag. As soon as he walked in, the harsh, toxic smell of burnt metal and sour chemicals filled my clean room. My lungs instinctively tightened in panic. "Miss Cooper," Mitchell said, pulling up a chair and sitting down heavily. "I will be perfectly honest with you. I don't believe in sugarcoating the truth. Your beautiful greenhouse did not just explode by a tragic, random accident." My stomach instantly felt like a heavy block of freezing ice. "What do you mean?" He held up the plastic bag. Inside was a heavy, blackened, twisted piece of brass. "This is the main gas valve from your propane heater. Someone used a heavy industrial pipe wrench to loosen it on purpose. They didn't break it. They carefully unscrewed it just enough to create a slow, steady gas leak. It was perfectly designed to fill the room with gas and blow up the exact moment you flipped the main light switch." I don't understand," I stammered. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the bed rails. "If the valve was loosened 6 days ago when my mother visited, the gas would have run out days ago, or I would have smelled it working in there all week." Mitchell leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "I have been investigating chemical fires for 20 long years, Eleanor. This is calculated, cold-blooded attempted murder. You are right. If it was fully loosened 6 days ago, you would have known. So I have to ask you, who had access to your greenhouse last week to plan it? And more importantly, who was there yesterday to give that metal valve the final, deadly turn?" The memory hit me like a physical punch to the ribs. My mother. She had come to visit 6 days ago. She had lingered near the heavy heater in the back of the shop, her eyes darting around the room. She planned the entire murder. But Mitchell was right. She wasn't there yesterday. She didn't execute it alone. She needed someone on the inside. My heart dropped into an endless black hole. Chloe. My young, sweet, incredibly underpaid studio assistant. Just last night, right before the blast, Chloe had nervously begged to leave an hour early. She couldn't look me in the eye. She was shaking. I thought she was just feeling sick. I let her go early, and 10 minutes later, I flipped the light switch. My own mother paid my assistant to kill me. Before I could even process the massive, crushing weight of this double betrayal, the bright hallway lights outside my room flickered violently. Justin's radio hissed with loud, panicked static. "Code Silver in the ICU. I repeat, Code Silver. Unauthorized male bypass at the east elevators. He has a weapon," a security guard screamed through the radio. Someone had bypassed hospital security, and they were on my floor. "We need to move, now," Justin ordered. His warm, comforting demeanor vanished instantly, replaced by the cold, calculated precision of a man trained for worst-case scenarios. He didn't wait for a nurse. He grabbed the thick medical tape holding my IVs in place and ripped it off with agonizing speed. A sharp jolt of pain shot up my arm, followed by a warm trickle of blood, but I didn't make a sound. My lungs were burning, screaming for oxygen, but a primal, terrifying instinct had taken over. I was a sitting duck in a sterile white cage. "Justin, what's happening?" Mitchell asked, his hand instinctively dropping to the heavy holster on his hip. "Someone bypassed the security desk. They're hunting," Justin whispered, his eyes locked on the small glass window of my hospital door. He quickly lifted me from the bed. My legs felt like useless, trembling weights. He dropped me roughly but securely into a heavy transport wheelchair. I clutched my bandaged chest. In my work as a botanical artist, I understand how fragile the vascular system of a rare plant is, how easily a single cut to the stem can stop the flow of life. Right now I felt like a severed stem, weak, bleeding out, entirely dependent on the man pushing my chair. We burst out of the room. The ICU hallway, usually a place of quiet, controlled healing, was pure chaos. Nurses were ducking behind heavy counters. The overhead lights flickered, casting long, nightmarish shadows against the walls. "Stairwell, go," Mitchell barked, covering our flank. Just as Justin shoved my wheelchair forward, a man turned the corner. He was wearing a pale blue hospital orderly uniform, but it hung loosely on him, completely the wrong size. His eyes were dead and focused entirely on me. He didn't look at the alarms. He didn't look at the nurses. He reached deep into his right pocket, his knuckles turning white as he gripped something metallic and heavy. Time seemed to slow down into a thick, suffocating crawl. I heard the sharp squeak of the fake orderly's rubber soles. I saw the cold, mechanical way his jaw clenched. Justin didn't hesitate. He kicked a heavy metal laundry cart directly into the man's path, sending it crashing into his knees, and then violently shoved my wheelchair through the heavy fire doors of the emergency stairwell. "Hold on," Justin grunted, practically carrying the wheelchair down the first flight of concrete stairs. Every bump sent a shockwave of white-hot pain through my broken ribs, but the fear of the man behind us numbed the agony. We didn't stop at the ground floor. We snuck deeper, down into the windowless, dimly lit underground laundry tunnels of the hospital. The air down here was thick and damp, smelling of harsh industrial bleach and wet lint. The massive, humming boiler pipes along the ceiling groaned like dying animals. The wheels of my chair clicked softly on the cold concrete floor, a rhythmic ticking that sounded exactly like a bomb counting down. We had to be completely invisible. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every dark corner, every shadow stretching across the tunnel walls looked like a killer waiting to finish the job my mother started. If this chase is making your heart race, make sure you hit that subscribe button to hear the rest of the story. Have you ever had to run from a situation you thought was perfectly safe? Tell me in the comments. By the time Justin finally drove me to Great Aunt Beatrice's hidden wooden cottage deep in the countryside, the sun had fully set. The sky was a bruised, dark purple, weeping a freezing, misty rain. The cottage was small, tucked behind a thick wall of ancient weeping willows. As soon as Justin carried me inside, the sweet, comforting smell of peppermint tea and old, dusty library books washed over me. It was the smell of safety. Beatrice was a tiny, fragile woman. Her silver hair was pinned up, and her hands were heavily veined with age. But when she saw me, her bright, intelligent eyes burned with a fierce, unbreakable fire. She rushed forward, her slippers shuffling against the creaky hardwood floor, and wrapped her thin arms around me so carefully, making sure not to touch my bandaged chest. "Oh, my brave, precious girl," Beatrice cried softly, the warmth of her tears soaked through my hospital gown. "Your Grandma Rose would be so incredibly proud of how strong you are. We are going to protect you from them, Eleanor. I promise you." I completely broke down. The emotional dam I had been holding back finally shattered. I sobbed uncontrollably into her warm shoulder. The physical pain in my lungs was nothing compared to the deep, rotting agony of betrayal. My Grandma Rose was currently bedridden in a state-run nursing home with severe, progressing memory loss. Aunt Beatrice and I were the only family members who truly loved her, who sat by her bed and brushed her hair when she forgot her own name. My parents only saw Grandma Rose as a ticking bank account. They were waiting for her to die, and when she didn't die fast enough, they decided to sacrifice me to get her money. Later that evening, the storm outside worsened. The wind howled against the wooden shutters. I sat wrapped in a heavy quilt by Beatrice's crackling stone fireplace, staring at the copy of the forged insurance paper Grant had given me. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the popping embers. I studied the forged signature with the meticulous, trained eye of an illustrator. I understand the anatomy of a line. When you sign your own name, your hand glides across the paper like flowing water. It is muscle memory, thoughtless and smooth. But this signature, it was a nightmare of hesitation. I traced my trembling finger over the ink. There were sharp, nervous points at the top of the E. The loop of the L was rigid, forced. The ink was pooled deeply at the end of the meaning the person holding the pen had paused, pressing down hard, terrified of making a mistake. My mother. I realized, with a wave of absolute, sickening nausea, that my mother had sat at her expensive oak dining table and practiced my name over and over again. She had studied my handwriting. She had meticulously perfected the art of being me. She had planned my brutal murder while looking right at my face, smiling at me, calling me her daughter. The truth was finally clear, and it was a terrifying, suffocating weight. I was a ghost to them. They had already buried me in their minds. But sitting still in this quiet cottage wasn't an option. I couldn't just hide while they destroyed Grandma Rose's life and danced on the ashes of my ruined greenhouse. I had to strike back. I woke up the next morning to the soft, distant singing of bluebirds outside Aunt Beatrice's frosted window. The fresh, clean smell of morning dew and wet pine was a huge relief after the harsh chemical sting of the hospital. But my body was still a war zone. My bandaged chest tightly ached with every shallow breath, a cruel reminder of how close I had come to being nothing but ash. I sat up on the edge of the thick patchwork quilt, the cold wooden floorboards chilling my bare feet. My eyes locked onto the old, heavy rotary phone sitting on the wooden nightstand. I needed answers. I needed to hear her voice, to see if I could detect even a single ounce of guilt. In my line of work as a botanical artist, I spend hundreds of hours studying the exact way a plant grows, how water flows through its veins, and how rot slowly creeps in from the roots. I needed to examine the rot in my own mother. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped rabbit as I picked up the heavy receiver. I carefully spun the rotary dial, inputting my mother's number. My hands were freezing. Ring, ring, ring. Hello? Pamela's voice answered. It was smooth, elevated, and completely professional. Her typical, perfectly rehearsed real estate agent voice. She sounded like she was having a wonderful morning. "Mom, it's me," I said. I forced my voice to stay steady, swallowing the lump of pure terror in my throat. "I'm resting at a friend's place." I lied smoothly, letting her think I was clueless and weak. "Oh, Eleanor, darling." The fake relief in her voice was sickening. It was too loud, too forced. "We have been worried absolutely sick. Why did you run away from the hospital?" "I was scared," I replied, keeping my words short. Then, I dropped the bait. "I was just wondering, Mom, when you visited the greenhouse last week, did you smell any gas near the heater?" There was a pause. It wasn't a normal, conversational pause. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that made the hair on my arms stand straight up. I could practically hear the gears turning in her calculating mind, calculating the risk, adjusting her mask. "Eleanor," she finally said. The sugary sweetness completely vanished from her tone, replaced by something cold, flat, and hollow. "I told you, I was just looking at those lovely purple orchids I bought you for your birthday." Why on earth would I smell gas? My chest tightened. She had actually bought me those rare orchids. It had been a rare moment of motherly kindness that I had cherished. Now I realized the horrifying truth. She only bought them as an excuse to get inside the building to plan my death. The betrayal hurt 1,000 times more than the fire. "Why are you asking these strange questions?" Pamela continued, her voice sharpening into a weapon. "Are the police bothering you?" "The fire investigator thinks it wasn't an accident," I said, my voice shaking just a little bit. "Listen to me." Her voice was now pure ice, slow and deliberate. "Do not speak to anyone without my lawyer present, Eleanor. You hit your head very hard in that explosion. The doctors told us you are confused. You are having delusions." She was already setting up her defense. She was planting the seed that I was crazy, systematically gaslighting me to protect her own skin. Click. The line went completely dead. Have you ever had someone try to make you feel like you were losing your mind just so they could get away with a lie? Tell me in the comments how you handled it. I slammed the heavy phone back onto the receiver. My blood was boiling, pushing past the pain in my lungs. "Justin," I yelled, ignoring the sharp agony in my ribs as I stood up. He ran into the room, his security instincts instantly on high alert. "Take me to the greenhouse, right now." Justin tried to protest, his eyes scanning my pale face and bandages. "Eleanor, it's a completely unsecured crime scene. It's not safe." "Take me," I demanded, looking him dead in the eye. He saw the unbreakable fire in my gaze. I wasn't the weak, dying girl from the ICU anymore. I was a survivor demanding the truth. We drove under the heavy cover of dusk. The sky was a bleeding mix of dark orange and charcoal gray. As we pulled up to the blackened, skeletal ruins of my studio, the air still smelled deeply of sour ash and melted plastic. We killed the car engine a block away and walked the rest of the distance in absolute silence. As we crept through the crunchy melted glass on the ground, the wind whistled through the charred wooden beams. Then I heard it. Scrape, scrape, clink. Someone was in the ruins. Justin immediately put his arm out, stopping me in my tracks. He silently drew a heavy-duty flashlight from his jacket. We ducked behind a massive charred oak table that used to hold my beautiful fern collection. In the back corner, near the twisted melted remains of the massive propane heater, a small flashlight beam danced across the ash. It was Chloe. My young assistant was on her hands and knees, frantically digging through the thick, wet soil and ash with her bare hands. She was crying hysterically, her shoulders shaking with loud, panicked sobs. Suddenly, she pulled something out of the dirt. It was a heavy, industrial silver pipe wrench, covered in soot. She clutched it to her chest like a lifeline. I couldn't hold back anymore. The rot was right in front of me. I stepped out from the deep shadows. "Looking for this?" I asked, my voice echoing coldly in the empty, burnt shell of my life's work. Chloe screamed, dropping the heavy wrench with a loud metal clank. She scrambled backward into the dirt, shining her flashlight directly into my face. "Eleanor," she gasped, her eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. You're alive. The news said you were in a coma." She fell to her knees, sobbing violently into her dirty hands. "Why, Chloe?" I asked. My voice wasn't angry, it was entirely broken. I had taught her everything about plants. I had shared my lunches with her when she couldn't afford food. "Why did you do it?" "I am so sorry," she wailed, rocking back and forth in the ash. "Your mother, she came to me. She offered me $10,000 just to give the brass valve one final, hard turn before I left yesterday. I was completely broke, Eleanor. My rent was due." I stared at her, feeling a cold numbness spread through my veins. $10,000. That was the exact price tag my mother had put on my life. The price of a cheap used car. "She swore to me you wouldn't be inside," Chloe begged, reaching her dirty hands toward me. "She promised the insurance would cover the building damage. I didn't know it would blow up with you in it. I swear." The betrayal cut so deep it felt like it severed my spine. My own assistant, someone I nurtured and protected, had sold my life for a stack of cash. Justin quickly stepped forward, putting his large frame between me and Chloe. He pulled a thick plastic evidence bag from his pocket and used his pen to carefully lift the heavy pipe wrench into the bag. "We have the weapon," Justin whispered to me, his jaw locked tight with anger. "We have what we need." I looked down at Chloe one last time. She was just a pathetic, greedy pawn in my mother's sick, twisted game. I turned my back on her and walked away through the ashes. But my mother's attacks were far from over. The drive back to Aunt Beatrice's hidden cottage was completely silent. The heavy, freezing rain battered against the car windshield like tiny, angry fists. I stared out into the pitch-black night, feeling entirely hollow. As a botanical artist, I spend my life studying how living things thrive. I understand the delicate, complex network of roots that pull water from the dark soil to keep a massive tree alive. But tonight, I finally understood the nature of a parasite. My mother wasn't just a bad parent. She was a vine that wraps tightly around a healthy tree, slowly choking the life out of it so she could reach the sunlight herself. We walked into the cottage just as the heavy antique clock on the wall struck 9. The warm, crackling fire Aunt Beatrice had built earlier was now just a pile of dying, red-hot embers. The cottage felt colder, the wooden floorboards creaking loudly under our wet shoes. Suddenly, the heavy rotary phone on the kitchen wall screamed into the quiet room. I jumped, my injured ribs burning with a sharp, white-hot flash of pain. Justin immediately put his hand on my shoulder to steady me. "I'll get it," Aunt Beatrice whispered, rushing over. She lifted the heavy receiver. "Hello?" Beatrice's face instantly went pale. She looked at me, her intelligent eyes wide with sudden fear, and held the phone out. "It's your Aunt Martha." I took the phone. Aunt Martha was a kind-hearted middle school teacher. She was the family peacemaker, the woman who always baked extra pies for Thanksgiving and desperately tried to keep everyone smiling. "Aunt Martha?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, honey. Oh, Eleanor, I am so incredibly worried," Martha cried. Her voice was trembling so violently I could hear her teeth chattering over the line. "Your mother just called me." She was hysterical, crying her eyes out. "She said the explosion gave you severe permanent brain damage. She told the whole family you ran away from the hospital and are having crazy violent delusions about her." My hands turned to ice. She was moving incredibly fast, spreading her toxic poison to the rest of the family before I could even defend myself. "I am not crazy, Aunt Martha," I whispered, fighting back the hot, frustrating tears. "She is lying to you." "I know, honey. I know you aren't," Martha hesitated. The line was quiet for an agonizing second, filled only by the sound of static. "But Eleanor, Pamela didn't just call to cry. She filed emergency legal papers at the courthouse this morning. She hired an expensive private ambulance." "An ambulance? For what?" "She is trying to forcibly transfer Grandma Rose out of Sunny Pines nursing home right now. She wants to move her into a terrible, cheap state facility on the edge of town." My blood boiled hot with sudden, terrifying anger. "Why would she do that? Grandma Rose needs special, round-the-clock care." "Because," Martha choked out, "if Pamela proves to a judge that you are mentally unfit to handle the life insurance money from the fire, she can step in as the emergency guardian. She can take full legal control of Grandma's entire estate by tomorrow morning. Eleanor, she is secretly packing up Grandma's things. She wants to sell Grandma's beautiful childhood home to pay off Robert's massive bankruptcy debts to some very dangerous men." I dropped the heavy phone. It dangled by its curly cord, swinging back and forth against the wall. She wasn't just trying to kill me. She was systematically trying to erase my existence, steal Grandma's dignity, and throw the woman who raised her into a cheap, miserable facility just to save her wealthy lifestyle. The sheer, calculated evil of it took my breath away. Has a toxic person ever tried to turn your own family or friends against you by spreading horrible lies? Let me know in the comments how you handled the rumors. And please hit the like button if you want to see Eleanor fight back. Later that evening, the heavy front door opened, letting in a gust of freezing wind. Justin stepped inside. He looked utterly exhausted, his security uniform soaked with rain. In his large hands he carried a heavy, mud-covered black metal box that smelled strongly of wet, rotting soil. "What is that?" Aunt Beatrice asked, bringing us steaming mugs of hot chamomile tea on a silver tray. "It is the main backup security hard drive from the Botanical Park's front gate," Justin explained. He wiped the thick, wet dirt off the metal casing with a towel and set it gently onto the dining table. "The fire completely melted the cameras inside your greenhouse, Eleanor, but this drive was buried in the concrete floor of the security shed down the street. The heat didn't reach it." Mitchell West, the forensic arson specialist, pulled up to the cottage a few minutes later. His boots were muddy and his eyes were sharp. "Did you get it?" he asked, walking straight to the table. We all gathered around the glowing, bright screen of Justin's laptop. The room was perfectly silent, filled only with the anxious rhythm of our breathing. Justin connected a thick cable from the dirty black box to his computer. "Loading the files," Justin whispered. My heart pounded against my bandages. A progress bar crawled slowly across the screen. 10%, 40%, 80%. Every second stretched out like a rubber band pulled tight, ready to snap. I thought about the delicate structure of a flower petal, how it looks solid, but under a microscope it is mostly empty space and fragile cells. That's what my family was. A fragile illusion, about to be completely crushed by the truth. The video file finally clicked open. The security footage was grainy, black and white, and lacked any sound. Justin quickly clicked through the timestamps to the exact date of my mother's visit, 6 days ago. "Look right here." Justin pointed a thick finger at the screen, zooming in on the dark image. On the screen, a sleek, expensive black car pulled up to the greenhouse gate. My mother, Pamela, stepped out. She was wearing a sharp designer coat, holding her large, expensive leather purse tightly under her arm. But she wasn't looking at the beautiful flower displays in the front windows. She walked directly around to the back alley, right where the heavy yellow gas pipes fed into the building. We watched in completely silent horror as my mother opened her designer purse. She didn't pull out a phone or a mirror. She pulled out a massive, heavy silver pipe wrench. My breath caught in my throat. Seeing her actually do it was entirely different from knowing she did it. It made it real. The video showed Chloe walking out the back door to greet her. Pamela didn't hug her. She didn't smile. She pointed sharply at the metal pipes. For 20 agonizing minutes, my mother stood in the cold alley, physically demonstrating exactly how to place the heavy wrench onto the main brass valve. She was teaching my young assistant exactly how to murder me. Mitchell West crossed his arms tightly across his chest, a dark, satisfied shadow passing over his tired face. That wrench Chloe was trying to dig up in the ashes tonight is the exact tool in her hand, Mitchell said, his voice hard as stone. We finally have our smoking gun. She paid for the hit, and she provided the weapon. I stared at the glowing laptop screen, watching the ghost of my mother calmly put the weapon back into her purse and drive away. My inner voice, which had been trembling with fear for days, suddenly went perfectly still and cold. She wanted a war. She thought she was fighting a weak, broken little girl who would just roll over and die. She didn't know I was finally ready to burn her fake, perfect world to the ground. The next morning, the sweet, comforting smell of Aunt Beatrice baking warm cinnamon rolls filled the small cottage. It was a smell deeply rooted in my childhood, a scent of safety and love. But as I sat at the scratched wooden dining table, my bandaged chest wrapped in a thick wool sweater, I felt entirely disconnected from it. I felt like a winter tree that had shed all its soft leaves, leaving only hard, unbending branches. I was no longer the frightened girl crying in a hospital bed. I was coldly, quietly awake. Justin had gone into town to meet with the local police, leaving his heavy silver laptop on the table for me to use. The house was quiet, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. I opened the web browser. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment. Then, driven by a dark, twisting curiosity, I typed in the web address for Pamela's luxury real estate agency. The website loaded with a bright, flashy banner displaying my mother's perfectly photoshopped face. She was smiling, wearing a diamond necklace, looking like the picture of trustworthy success. I scrolled past the million-dollar mansions and glass-walled condos, and then, my stomach dropped like a heavy stone. My hands instantly froze on the mousepad. There it was, right on the front page. Grandma Rose's beautiful historic Victorian home. It was secretly listed under a massive banner that read, "Coming soon, prime investment opportunity." I clicked on the photo gallery, my heart pounding a sickening rhythm against my ribs. My mother had brought in professional photographers to shoot the house while Grandma was lying sick in her hospital bed. But the house wasn't just empty, it was completely stripped of its soul. Grandma Rose's beautiful velvet armchairs were gone. Her collection of delicate, hand-painted teacups, the ones she had washed by hand for 50 years, had been packed away into cheap cardboard boxes visible in the corner of one photo. The walls looked cold and bare. My mother had erased her. She was measuring the rooms for profit while the woman who raised her was slowly losing her mind in a nursing home. A hot, bitter tear fell onto the keyboard. It was the ultimate violation. Have you ever seen someone you love treated like they didn't matter just because they were old or sick? It is a heartbreaking reality for so many. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to protect an elderly family member. That afternoon, the heavy wooden door of the cottage knocked 3 times. Mitchell West stepped inside, bringing a blast of cold, damp air with him. Right behind him was a woman named Danielle Reed. Danielle was an expert estate fraud attorney. She wore a crisp, tailored navy blue suit that looked completely out of place in our cozy, rustic cottage. She smelled strongly of expensive espresso and cold rain, and she had the sharp, calculating eyes of an eagle scanning for prey. She didn't believe in small talk. "Let's see it," Danielle said, dropping her heavy leather briefcase onto the dining table. I handed her the copy of the forged insurance document. Danielle pulled a pair of silver reading glasses from her pocket, followed by a bright, portable UV light scanner. She clicked the light on. The room bathed in an eerie, glowing purple hue. "Look at the ink pressure right here on the loop of the E," Danielle said, pointing with the tip of a silver pen. Her voice was low, fast, and intensely focused. "When you sign your own name, Eleanor, your hand glides. It's fluid, like water flowing over rocks. But the person who forged this was sweating. They were nervous. They pressed down so hard on the paper right here, the fibers on the back are almost torn." I nodded, feeling a spark of nervous hope ignite in my chest. "So, you can prove to a judge it is fake?" "Oh, I can prove much more than that," Danielle smirked, a cold, dangerous smile that made me glad she was on my side. She slid the UV light down to the very bottom of the page. Your mother made a very stupid, highly arrogant mistake. Criminals who think they are smarter than everyone else always do. She pointed to a faint, perfectly round blue circle stamped next to the fake signature. She was in such a desperate rush to make this document look legally binding for the insurance payout, Danielle explained, her eyes flashing, that she used her own official state real estate notary stamp to illegally approve it. Mitchell let out a low, sharp whistle, leaning against the doorframe. Using a state-issued notary stamp to commit a felony forgery that crosses the line into a massive federal crime. Exactly, Danielle said, smartly gathering her papers and snapping her briefcase shut. Between the security video of her holding the wrench, this illegal notary stamp, and the secret real estate listing of your grandmother's house, she has dug her own grave. But I didn't stop there. I subpoenaed the insurance broker, a man named Marcus. He's an old gambling buddy of your stepfather's. His emails are a goldmine of fraud. They are completely cornered. Now we just wait for her to slip up in public. We didn't have to wait long. As the crickets began to chirp loudly outside the dark, shadowed porch that evening, my cell phone, a cheap replacement Justin had bought for me, vibrated wildly on the wooden table. The caller ID flashed a single word: Mom. The room went dead silent. Mitchell stood up slowly. Justin walked over, pressing a small button on his phone to record the audio. He gave me a sharp nod. Answer it. I took a deep, shaky breath, channeling all the coldness of a winter frost, and pressed the green button. Hello? I said, keeping my voice small, mimicking the confused, brain-damaged girl she told everyone I was. Eleanor, darling. Pamela's voice dripped through the speaker with a thick, fake, sugary sweetness. It was the exact tone she used when she was trying to sell a rotting house to a rich, unsuspecting buyer. But underneath the honey, I could hear her sharp, rapid breathing. She was anxious. The whole family has been crying. We are so incredibly worried about your mental health, sweetie. I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Are you? Yes, my poor baby, she gasped, laying the terrible acting on thick. Listen to me. I am hosting a special family dinner this Saturday at 3 p.m. at our house. We are going to talk about Grandma's estate and getting you the proper psychiatric care you need. It will just be a safe, loving space for people who care about you. Everyone wants to give you a big hug and support you through this tragic confusion. I stared at the black window, seeing my own pale reflection. I could see the trap perfectly. Support me. She wanted to ambush me. She was gathering my aunts, uncles, and cousins to publicly display the crazy, brain-damaged Eleanor. She wanted me to have a meltdown in front of witnesses so she could force me to sign away my legal rights, making her the sole guardian of Grandma Rose's life and money. She thought she was setting a trap for a weak, blind little mouse. She didn't know she was opening the cage to a starving lion. I paused, letting the silence stretch out over the phone line for 5 agonizing seconds. I wanted her to sweat. I will be there, Mom, I finally said, my voice completely flat and hollow. Oh, wonderful, she breathed out, unable to hide the wicked relief in her voice. Dress warmly, sweetie. We will see you then. Click. I set the phone down slowly. The silence in the cottage felt incredibly heavy, charged with electricity. I looked up at Mitchell, Justin, and Danielle. She is throwing a massive family dinner to prove to everyone that I am crazy, I said, my heart starting to pound a slow, terrifying war drum against my ribs. I am walking right into the lion's den. Mitchell stepped out of the shadows, a slight, grim smile on his tired face. Then let's make sure the lion gets locked in a cage. The morning of the family dinner, the sky above Aunt Beatrice's cottage was the color of bruised iron. A heavy, freezing drizzle painted the windows with slow, crying streaks of water. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the gray light. My chest still ached with every breath, a tight, burning reminder of the fire. In the botanical world, there is a specific type of parasitic fungus called blight. It doesn't strike all at once. It starts small, hiding in the damp shadows, quietly eating away at the healthy tissue of a plant until the entire structure collapses from the inside out. My mother was the blight, and she was moving faster than we expected. At exactly 10:15 a.m., my phone buzzed violently against the wooden nightstand. The sudden, harsh noise made my heart leap into my throat. It was a frantic, misspelled text message from Aunt Martha. Eleanor, come quickly. Pamela is at Sunny Pines. She brought a private ambulance. She has legal papers. She's trying to take Grandma Rose right now. My blood turned to absolute ice. The trap at dinner wasn't enough for her. She wanted total control of Grandma's accounts before the family even sat down to eat. "Justin," I screamed, my voice cracking with panic as I grabbed my heavy wool coat. "We have to go now." Justin didn't ask questions. He saw the pure, terrifying urgency in my eyes. We sprinted to his car, slipping on the wet gravel. I didn't care about my injured, broken ribs anymore. I didn't care about the pain. Adrenaline, thick and cold, flooded my veins. We drove like madmen. The tires squealed dangerously on the slick, rain-soaked pavement as we tore through the city streets. "Hold on," Justin ordered, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he swerved around a slow-moving truck. His jaw was locked in tight concentration. If you've ever had to rush to protect someone you love from danger, drop a green heart in the comments. The panic of not knowing if you'll make it in time is the worst feeling in the world. We hit the Sunny Pines nursing home parking lot, the car jerking to a harsh halt. I threw the door open before we even fully stopped. I sprinted through the sliding automatic glass doors, gasping for air, the sterile smell of lavender floor cleaner hitting my nose. There, halfway down the main corridor, were two large men in cheap, unmarked orderly uniforms. They were rolling Grandma Rose out in a heavy metal transport chair. Grandma looked so tiny, wrapped in a thin blue blanket, her eyes wide and confused, softly asking where she was going. And marching right behind them, waving a bright yellow stack of fake guardianship papers at the protesting head nurse, was my mother. Pamela was dressed in an expensive, perfectly tailored beige trench coat, looking like a wealthy savior. She is my mother, and as her emergency legal proxy, I am transferring her to a specialized facility. Pamela barked at the nurse, her voice loud and deeply arrogant. "Stop!" I yelled. My voice echoed sharply against the linoleum floors. I marched forward, placing my body directly between the transport chair and the exit doors. I planted my feet firmly on the ground. My chest was heaving, but my eyes were locked onto my mother's face. Pamela froze completely. Her expensive leather purse slipped slightly from her shoulder. Her eyes widened with pure, naked shock. She had fully expected to see a broken, bedridden, brain-damaged girl shivering in fear. She didn't expect a wall. "Eleanor, what on earth are you doing here?" she stammered. Her fake, loving smile trembled and completely collapsed, exposing the furious, calculating gears grinding underneath. "You are not taking her anywhere," I said. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. It rang with a fierce, unbreakable power I didn't even know I possessed. Pamela quickly forced a sweet, condescending smile, glancing nervously at the two orderlies. "Sweetie, please, your brain injury is making you confused again. Grandma needs to go to her new safe hospital." Justin stepped up right beside me, casting a large, intimidating shadow over the group. He smoothly pulled his official hospital security badge from his pocket and flashed it directly at the confused orderlies. "These transfer documents are currently under active federal investigation for forgery," Justin stated, his voice low, calm, and incredibly dangerous. "If you wheel this patient out those doors, you are participating in a federal kidnapping. Put the patient back in her room, now." The two orderlies looked at Justin, looked at my mother, and immediately backed away, their hands raised in surrender. "Hey lady, we just drive the van," the taller one muttered, quickly abandoning the transport chair. Pamela's face twisted from shock into pure, unfiltered rage. The mask was completely gone. She looked ugly, her eyes narrowed into hateful little slits, the veins bulging visibly against her powdered neck. She lunged forward, grabbing my upper arm. Her sharp, manicured fingernails dug painfully into my skin through my coat. She leaned in close, her expensive vanilla perfume completely suffocating me, and hissed directly into my ear so no one else could hear. "You stupid, arrogant little fool," Pamela whispered, her breath hot against my cheek. "You have no idea what is coming for you. You are going to ruin everything." I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I stared right into the dark, rotting abyss of my mother's eyes. "I'll see you at dinner, Mom," I whispered back, completely unflinching. She let go of me as if she had been burned. She snatched her purse, spun on her expensive heels, and stormed out the automatic doors, disappearing into the cold, gray rain, leaving Grandma Rose safe, for now. An hour later, I stood by the dusty front window of Aunt Beatrice's cottage, watching the storm clouds gather into a thick, suffocating blanket over the trees. My stomach twisted in tight, painful knots. The real battle was just a few hours away. Justin and Danielle Reed arrived early. Danielle didn't bother with a polite greeting. She slammed a thick, heavy stack of printed bank records onto the wooden dining table. Her dark hair was wet from the rain, and her eyes flashed with absolute disgust. "We just got the emergency subpoena back from the central bank," Danielle said, her voice sharp like a razor blade. "Robert didn't just lose his money gambling in the stock market like he claimed." "What did he do?" Aunt Beatrice asked, bringing a hand to her mouth. "He illegally accessed and emptied Grandma Rose's private safety deposit box last month," Danielle explained, dragging a manicured finger across the highlighted financial statements. "He stole every single piece of her vintage heirloom jewelry. He pawned it all in cash to pay off a group of very violent, very angry loan sharks. He owes hundreds of thousands of dollars to people who break legs for a living." My breath caught painfully in my throat. I felt physically sick. Mom and Robert were completely out of control. They were drowning in a deadly ocean of illegal debt. They had stolen from a helpless old woman, and now they were desperately trying to silence me forever so they wouldn't go to federal prison. The life insurance money from my death wasn't just greed. It was their bloody lifeline. "I have to go to that dinner," I said, my hands curling into tight, shaking fists at my sides. "I have to let them expose themselves in front of everyone." Mitchell West stepped out from the kitchen, holding a small black electronic device with a tangle of thin wires. His tired face was completely serious. "If you do this, Eleanor, there is no turning back," Mitchell warned slowly. "Justin and I will be parked in an undercover, unmarked black van right outside your parents' neighborhood gates. I am going to tape this hidden microphone directly under your collar. The second they confess to the fire, the forgery, or try to force you into signing anything, you say the safe word." "Orchid," I whispered, remembering the rare flower I had been sketching right before the bomb went off. "Exactly," Mitchell nodded, stepping closer to carefully weave the wire under my thick wool sweater. The cold tape felt like ice against my skin. "Say the word orchid, and we are coming through the front door. But Eleanor, listen to me very carefully. You have to be fast. These people are desperate. If Robert snaps and gets violent, we are 2 full minutes away." I looked down at the tiny black microphone taped near my collarbone. It was the only thing standing between me and a family that wanted me dead. I took a deep breath, feeling the heavy, cold weight of reality settle onto my shoulders. "I'm ready." At exactly 2:55 p.m., I pulled up to my parents' massive, brick-faced suburban mansion. The freezing rain was coming down in thick, gray sheets, making the entire world look washed out and dead. I sat in the passenger seat of Justin's undercover car for a long moment, just staring at the house through the beating windshield wipers. This place used to look like a castle to me when I was a little girl. But now, with my eyes finally wide open, I could see the undeniable signs of their hidden bankruptcy and deep, rotting debt. The tall, manicured grass was turning brown and dying. The expensive stone fountain in the front yard was turned off, gathering dirty rainwater and dead leaves. The glossy white paint on the grand front door was slowly peeling away, looking like dead bark shedding from a sick tree. They were drowning, violently kicking their legs under the water just to keep their wealthy image afloat. And they were willing to drown me to survive. "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this, Eleanor?" Justin whispered from the driver's seat. His voice was thick with worry. "We can just take the video to the police right now." I touched the collar of my heavy wool sweater. I could feel the cold, hard plastic of the hidden microphone taped against my collarbone. It picked up the frantic, uneven thumping of my heart. "I have to," I said softly, my voice tight. "If we just hand over the video, my mother will hire expensive lawyers and spin it into a misunderstanding. She will claim she was fixing the heater, not breaking it. I need her to say it out loud. I need the family to hear who she really is." I opened the car door and stepped out into the freezing downpour. The cold immediately bit into my injured ribs, making me gasp slightly. Every step up the long concrete driveway felt like walking to my own funeral. 18 expensive cars were parked tightly along the street. All my aunts, uncles, and older cousins were inside. My mother had gathered the entire audience. I took a deep, shaky breath, burying my fear deep down into my roots, and knocked on the heavy wooden door. The door swung open almost instantly. Pamela stood there. She was wearing a sharp, flawless white designer blazer and perfectly round fake pearl earrings. Her hair was styled immaculately. She looked like the ultimate caring, wealthy mother. But as I looked closer, I saw the tiny, unnatural micro-expressions. The tight, forced pull at the corners of her mouth. The slight, nervous twitch of her left eyelid. The inside of the house smelled overwhelmingly of rich roasted lamb, heavy red wine, and thick, expensive vanilla candles. It was a suffocating smell, purposely designed to mask the suffocating tension in the air. "Eleanor," Pamela cried out. Her voice was much too loud, perfectly projected so that every single person in the living room could hear her. She threw her arms around me, hugging me tightly. I froze. Her embrace didn't feel like a mother's love. It felt like a snake wrapping around its prey. Her designer perfume was sickeningly sweet, clogging my burning lungs. "My poor broken baby," Pamela loudly cooed, though her grip on my injured shoulder was painfully tight. "We are going to get you the psychiatric help you desperately need." She pulled back, giving me a deeply tragic fake smile, and guided me into the sunken living room like I was a fragile, mindless doll. The room was painfully quiet. The only sound was the heavy rhythmic tick-tock of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. Every tick felt like a hammer striking an anvil. I looked around at the faces of my family, the people I had shared Thanksgiving dinners and childhood birthdays with. Aunt Martha sat on the edge of the white leather sofa, looking at me with deep, sorrowful pity. Uncle Timothy was swirling his crystal wine glass, nervously shaking his head. Cousin Brandon wouldn't even make eye contact with me, whispering something to his wife. My mother's poison had worked perfectly. They all looked at me like I was a tragic, unstable stranger who might snap at any second. I had never felt more entirely, terrifyingly alone. Robert, my stepfather, stood stiffly in the corner by the grand piano. He refused to look in my direction. His face was pale, shiny with nervous sweat, and a thick blue vein pulsed visibly on his forehead. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a tall cliff, terrified of the drop. "Come sit down right here, sweetie," Pamela said, gently pushing me onto the center cushion of the largest couch. "Family, thank you all for coming to support our dear Eleanor during this tragic, heartbreaking mental breakdown." The silence in the room grew thicker, heavier. I folded my hands in my lap to stop them from shaking. I needed to let her speak. I needed her to tighten the noose around her own neck. Pamela reached onto the glass coffee table and picked up a thick blue legal clipboard with a silver pen attached to it. She knelt in front of me, placing a warm hand over my freezing ones. Her eyes were wide, pleading, and entirely dead inside. "Eleanor, darling," she said softly, her voice shaking with fake emotion. "Your father and I love you so, so much. We know the fire damaged your brain. We know you are confused and scared. We just want to take care of you, and take care of Grandma Rose. All you have to do is sign this medical power of attorney form." She gently pushed the clipboard onto my lap. "It just gives me the legal right to manage your health decisions and Grandma's estate while you rest in a special safe facility. We will handle all the hard things for you, sweetie." I stared down at the bright white paper. The legal jargon was dense, but the meaning was clear. It was a total surrender. If I signed this, she would have absolute, unquestionable legal control over my life, my bank accounts, and Grandma's house. I would be locked away in a ward, and she would walk away a millionaire. If you were in Eleanor's shoes, sitting in a room full of people judging you based on a lie, what would you say? Tell me in the comments. I slowly looked up from the paper. I looked at Aunt Martha's sad face, then directly into my mother's cold, calculating eyes. My heart was pounding so hard I was terrified the microphone would pick up the thumping sound. "And what if I don't sign it?" I asked. I kept my voice completely calm, flat, and devoid of any emotion. The fake, loving smile on Pamela's face instantly shattered. Her eyes hardened into tiny dark stones. Before she could speak, Robert stepped forward from the piano. He couldn't hold his panic in anymore. His hands were violently trembling, spilling a few drops of red wine onto the white carpet. "If you don't sign it right now, Eleanor," Robert muttered, his voice hard, desperate, and deeply threatening, "we will be forced to call the authorities. We will tell the police that you started the greenhouse fire yourself in a crazy fit of madness for insurance money." Loud gasps echoed around the sunken living room. Aunt Martha covered her mouth in pure shock. Uncle Timothy sat up straight. They were openly blackmailing me in front of the entire family. They were betting everything on the fact that I was too weak, too scared, and too broken to fight back. They thought I would just cry and sign the paper to avoid going to jail. I looked at the silver pen on the clipboard. Then I looked back at my mother. A brief, painful memory flashed through my mind. I remembered being 7 years old, sick with the flu, and my mother staying up until midnight sewing me a beautiful butterfly costume for a school play. It was a fleeting, heartbreaking memory of a good mother. But as I looked at the woman kneeling in front of me, I finally accepted the truth. That good mother was completely dead. The woman in front of me was a parasite. It was time to cut the rot out of my life forever. "So, let me get this straight," I said. I raised my voice, projecting it clearly into the heavy, echoing silence of the room so the hidden wire could catch every single syllable. You want me to sign away Grandma Rose's beautiful Victorian house, so you can secretly sell it to pay off Robert's massive stock market debts? Pamela's face twitched violently. She gave me a sickly, terrifying smile, her fingernails digging so hard into my knees I almost cried out. "We are doing what we must to save our family's reputation, Eleanor," she hissed under her breath. "The bank is going to take this mansion by Friday. Sign the paper." "And what about the greenhouse?" I pushed further, my voice rising, trembling slightly with a mix of fear and sheer adrenaline. "You expect me to take the blame for the fire, even though we both know you paid Chloe $10,000 to turn that gas valve?" Robert's jaw unhinged. He dropped his wine glass. It shattered against the floor, but no one moved. He looked at Pamela in sheer, unadulterated terror. "And even though," I continued, staring my mother down, "we know Marcus the broker pushed that fake insurance policy through the system with your illegal notary stamp?" Robert wiped a thick bead of sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand. He was completely losing his mind. He didn't know I knew about Marcus. He thought the police were already outside. His survival instinct overrode his brain. "Yes," Robert screamed, completely losing control. His voice cracked with hysterical fear. "Yes! And if you don't sign that paper right now, we will tell the police you took a wrench to your own propane heater because your stupid flower business was failing. No one will believe a crazy girl over us. We needed the money, Eleanor." The entire family erupted. Aunt Martha suddenly stood up, her knee knocking the heavy coffee table. "Pamela, what on earth is he saying?" Martha cried out, her face pale as a ghost. "Did you tamper with the heater? Did you try to kill your own daughter for insurance money?" Pamela's perfect, wealthy mask completely dissolved. Her face turned a violent, dark shade of purple. The veins in her neck popped out as she spun around to face her sister. "Shut up, Martha," Pamela snarled like a cornered animal. Her voice was unrecognizable, full of pure, ugly venom. "You have always been a weak, pathetic schoolteacher. You have no idea what it takes to survive in the real world." Pamela turned back to me, her eyes completely wild. She lunged forward, grabbing the collar of my sweater with both hands, shaking me violently. The blue clipboard clattered to the floor. "Sign the paper right now, you ungrateful little brat," she screamed, spit flying from her lips. "I brought you into this world and you owe me." My ribs screamed in absolute agony, but I stood my ground like a deep-rooted oak tree facing a hurricane. I looked her dead in the eye, my voice cutting through the screaming room with perfect, cold clarity. "I think it's time to check on the orchid." For a split second, Pamela looked completely confused. Her manicured fingers loosened their tight grip on my sweater. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, her eyes darting left and right, trying to calculate what my words meant. "What orchid?" 3 seconds later, she got her answer. Crash. The heavy mahogany front door didn't just open, it burst off its hinges with a deafening, violent crack. The expensive wood splintered loudly into the hallway. Mitchell West stormed into the foyer, his wet boots thudding heavily against the polished marble floor. He was holding a shiny silver police badge high in the air, followed immediately by Justin and 3 large, heavily armed uniformed police officers. The suffocating smell of expensive vanilla candles was instantly wiped out by the sharp, cold scent of damp rain, wet tactical gear, and harsh justice. "Police! Nobody move!" Mitchell shouted. His deep voice echoed off the high, painted ceilings, freezing every single person in the room. Robert jumped back, tripping over the piano bench. He dropped his expensive smartphone in sheer panic. It shattered into pieces against the hardwood floor, but he didn't even look down. He threw his hands up high in the air, his knees physically shaking so hard he could barely stand. Mitchell walked straight past the terrified aunts and uncles, marching directly up to my mother. "Pamela and Robert Cooper," Mitchell announced, his voice carrying the heavy weight of the law. "You are both under arrest for attempted murder, severe estate fraud, and grand theft." Pamela gasped, stumbling backward until her back hit the grand piano. The color completely drained from her face, leaving her looking old and terrified. "This is a mistake," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "My daughter is crazy. She is having an episode. She is lying to you." Mitchell didn't blink. He slowly reached up and tapped a small black radio earpiece tucked into his ear. "We heard everything, Pamela," Mitchell said coldly. "Your daughter is wearing a hidden wire. The microphone right under her collar just caught every single word of your confession. We also have Marcus the broker in custody, and we have Chloe's fully signed confession." Pamela stared at my collar, The realization hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't the smart, calculating predator anymore. She was trapped. Click, clack. The heavy metallic click of the steel handcuffs locking around her wrists echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. If you are relieved that justice is finally being served, please hit the like button right now. Have you ever seen karma catch up to someone who thought they were untouchable? Tell me about it in the comments. Outside the large custom windows, flashing red and blue police lights danced wildly across the rain-soaked glass, lighting up the room like a nightmare. As one of the officers stepped forward to tighten the cuffs on Robert's wrists, my stepfather completely crumbled. He dropped heavily to his knees on the ruined white carpet, sobbing loudly. Tears of pure cowardice streamed down his pale, sweaty face. He didn't care about his wife or his wealthy pride anymore. He only cared about saving himself from a dark, cold prison cell. It was all her idea, Robert shrieked, pointing his cuffed hands directly at my mother. She used her real estate license to forge the papers. She wanted to steal Grandma's house to pay off my debts. I didn't want to blow up the greenhouse. I just wanted the money. Please, I'll tell you everything. Pamela's eyes widened with pure vicious hatred. The fake loving mother act was instantly permanently gone. She wildly kicked her expensive designer heel at Robert's leg like a cornered rabid animal. You spineless, pathetic loser, Pamela screamed, her perfect hair now a wild, tangled mess. I did everything to save our wealthy lifestyle. I did the dirty work while you gambled it away, and now you stab me in the back? They were tearing each other apart. Watching them scream at each other, I finally understood the truth. They never loved each other. They only loved the money, the image, and the power. When all of that was taken away, there was nothing left but ugly, rotten greed. Two armed officers roughly grabbed Pamela by the arms, dragging her away from him. As they marched her toward the rain-soaked front door, she finally looked back at me. There was absolutely no apology in her eyes. There was only cold, bitter anger that she had been beaten by the daughter she thought was weak. I didn't say a single word. I didn't have to. I just stood tall and watched the monsters who raised me get dragged out into the freezing rain. Suddenly, the massive wave of adrenaline began to wear off. I felt a sharp, burning twinge in my bandaged ribs. The room started to spin. I stumbled backward, gasping for air. Justin quickly stepped forward and gently caught my arm. His firm, warm grip kept me steady. I've got you, Eleanor, he whispered softly. You're safe now. Just then, Great Aunt Beatrice rushed through the splintered front door. Her bright yellow raincoat was dripping with fresh rain. She was followed closely by two emergency hospital paramedics carrying a heavy orange medical bag. Justin had called them in advance to make sure the extreme stress didn't hurt my healing lungs. While the paramedics gently checked my breathing, the rest of the family stood frozen in absolute shock. Aunt Martha slowly walked toward Beatrice. Her hands were trembling violently as she wiped away her tears. Beatrice, Martha choked out, her voice breaking with deep, heavy shame. I am so terribly sorry. We banished you all those years ago. We were so blinded by Pamela's lies about you. We thought she was the good sister. Beatrice looked at Martha for a long, quiet moment. Instead of being angry or bitter, Beatrice gently reached out and pulled Martha into a warm, forgiving hug. True family protects each other, Martha, Beatrice said softly, resting her chin on her sister's shoulder. Now you finally know the truth. The rot is gone. It is time to heal. Uncle Timothy and Cousin Brandon looked at me with deep, silent regret, slowly nodding their heads. They knew empty apologies weren't enough right now. They had believed the lies, but they were finally seeing the light. Justin helped me walk outside into the cool, refreshing rain. The cold water on my face felt amazing. It felt like the sky was finally washing away all the toxic lies and the heavy smoke of the last week. Standing tall on the large front porch was Danielle Reed, the estate lawyer. She was holding a thick stack of bright yellow legal papers, completely unbothered by the rain. She gave me a sharp, victorious smile. I just got off the phone with the emergency federal judge, Danielle announced proudly. Grandma Rose's house is officially locked down and protected by the state. Pamela's real estate license has been instantly, permanently suspended. Danielle reached out and slapped a large, bright red seized by court order sticker directly onto the mansion's peeling front door. I let out a massive, shuddering breath. The heavy, dark storm cloud over my life was finally breaking apart, and I could feel the sun starting to peek through. The morning after the arrests, I woke up feeling surprisingly light, but it wasn't a happy lightness. It was the hollow, floating feeling of absolute numbness. The heavy, terrifying weight on my chest wasn't just my medical bandages anymore. The crushing fear of being hunted was finally gone, leaving behind an empty, echoing space. I sat up in Aunt Beatrice's quiet guest room, listening to the steady, peaceful rhythm of the morning rain tapping against the glass. For the first time in a week, nobody was trying to kill me, nobody was lying to me. But the silence felt incredibly loud. My first thought was Grandma Rose. I needed to see her. I needed to know she was truly safe. Justin drove Aunt Beatrice and me back to the Sunny Pines nursing home. The clean, quiet hallways smelled of fresh linen and sweet lavender, a massive, comforting difference from the sterile, chaotic hospital ICU. We found Grandma Rose sitting in her comfortable padded wheelchair by a large, bright window overlooking the garden. She had soft, thinning white hair and a gentle, slightly confused smile. Aunt Beatrice rushed over, dropping to her knees to gently kiss Grandma's soft cheeks, holding her delicate, wrinkly hands tightly. "We are all safe now, Rosie," Beatrice whispered, crying happy, exhausted tears. "The bad storm is finally over." I hugged Grandma carefully, resting my chin on her soft shoulder. My inner voice whispered, "We saved her. My mother didn't get to steal her home, her money, or her dignity." My heart felt like a torn patchwork quilt that was finally, slowly being stitched back together. Just then my phone buzzed with an urgent video call from Danielle, the estate lawyer. I answered it, putting her on speakerphone so Justin and Beatrice could hear. On the screen, Danielle was standing in a busy, echoing courthouse hallway. She looked incredibly satisfied. "Good news, Eleanor," Danielle said, her sharp eyes gleaming. "Robert officially took a plea deal just an hour ago." "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "He sat in the interrogation room and completely broke down," Danielle explained. "He told the police every single dirty detail about Pamela's real estate scams to save himself from a life sentence in prison. He is even giving up the names of the dangerous loan sharks he sold Grandma's vintage jewelry to. Because he fully cooperated and rolled over on your mother, he gets 3 years of strict probation and mandatory financial counseling." And my mother. My hands started to shake slightly. Danielle's smile sharpened into a blade. "Pamela furiously refused to confess to anything. She is still screaming that you are crazy. But with the hidden audio wire recording, the security video footage, Chloe's signed testimony, Marcus's emails, and the illegal notary stamp, she is facing over 20 years in federal prison for attempted murder and real estate fraud. I also got the judge to sign a permanent ironclad restraining order. Neither of them can ever come near you, Beatrice, or Grandma Rose again." I let out a massive, trembling breath. I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I hit the floor. It was over. We were truly legally protected. If you are glad Eleanor finally got the justice she deserved, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Hitting the like button helps these stories reach more people who might need to hear them. 3 days later, Justin drove me to the blackened, shattered ruins of my greenhouse studio. The police tape had been removed, leaving the skeleton of my life exposed to the cold wind. The air still smelled like sour smoke, wet ash, and melted glass. My stomach twisted into tight, painful knots as I looked at the twisted metal frames stretching into the gray sky. I had lost my beautiful art business, my specialized, expensive tools, and all my rare, delicate flowers. I crossed my arms, shivering in the cool breeze. It was so incredibly unfair. I had spent years building this sanctuary, and my mother destroyed it in a single night just to pay off a debt. As I stared at the ashes, feeling a heavy wave of grief wash over me, Justin carefully stepped over a melted wooden table. "Look, Eleanor," he said gently, crouching down near the back corner, right where the blast had originated. He walked back over to me and gently placed something in my hands. It was a tiny, dirty terracotta pot. Inside, covered in thick gray soot, was a single bright green orchid sprout. It had somehow survived the massive propane explosion, shielded by a fallen brick. I gently touched the small, smooth green leaf. Tears of pure, overwhelming hope filled my eyes. I held the tiny plant against my heart. My mother had tried to completely burn my life down, but just like this brave little orchid, my roots were far too strong. I was going to rebuild, and this time, I would build my life with people who actually loved me. One chilly Tuesday morning, Danielle asked Aunt Beatrice and me to meet her at the Grand Downtown Federal Bank. The bank smelled like polished marble floors and sterile, cold money. We walked down into the highly secure basement vault to finally open Grandma Rose's safety deposit box. The bank manager turned his key, and the heavy metal door groaned open. Inside, the velvet jewelry trays were completely empty. Robert had stolen every single diamond and pearl, but tucked in the very back, hiding in the shadows, was a dusty leather-bound photo album. Aunt Beatrice pulled it out with trembling hands. We set it on a metal table and slowly turned the yellowed pages. Suddenly, I stopped breathing. There was a photo of a young, smiling Pamela holding me as a newborn baby. She was wearing a simple, cheap cotton dress. She wasn't wearing fake pearls or expensive perfume, and her eyes were filled with pure, genuine, overwhelming love as she looked down at me. My throat tightened with a heavy, suffocating sadness. She hadn't always been a greedy monster. Before the wealthy lifestyle, the expensive cars, and the crushing pressure of the cutthroat real estate market, she was just a mother who loved her baby. But she let the money poison her soul. Like a toxic chemical poured into healthy soil, it had slowly warped her until there was nothing good left. I gently touched the photograph, saying a silent goodbye, and closed the album. I left that ghost of a good mother locked in the dark, cold vault forever. 6 months later, we drove to the massive, wood-paneled federal courthouse for the final sentencing. The air in the courtroom felt heavy and completely frozen. My mother was led into the room by an armed guard. The breath caught in my throat. She wasn't wearing her expensive designer blazers anymore. She wore a baggy, dull tan federal prison uniform. Her dyed brown hair had completely grown out, revealing stark white roots that made her look 20 years older. The arrogant fire in her eyes was completely gone, replaced by a hollow, defeated stare. She kept her eyes glued to the wooden table, refusing to look at me. The federal judge, a strict man with silver hair, looked down at her from his high bench. "Pamela Cooper," the judge said, his voice echoing loudly. "You used your official state notary license to commit severe federal forgery. You attempted to forcefully take over a helpless elderly woman's estate. And worst of all, you tried to brutally murder your own daughter in a calculated gas explosion for profit." I was called to the front to read my victim impact statement. My hands shook slightly holding the paper, but I stood up perfectly straight, channeling Aunt Beatrice's quiet, unbreakable strength. "You used to sew my Halloween costumes," I said, my voice ringing clearly across the silent courtroom. "You used to bake me cookies when I was sick. But you traded your own daughter's life for a commission check and a bigger house. You poisoned the mind of my innocent assistant just to save yourself. I forgive the mother you used to be, but I will never forgive the criminal you became." Pamela finally looked up at me. A single heavy tear rolled down her wrinkled, pale cheek. It was the first real emotion I had seen from her in years. But it was far too late. "I sentence you to 22 years in federal prison, with absolutely no chance of early parole," the judge announced, banging his wooden gavel loudly. The sound echoed like a final, heavy lock clicking shut on a cage. By springtime, the dark, freezing clouds in my life had completely cleared away. Aunt Beatrice had legally secured Grandma Rose's beautiful home, hiring top-tier, loving nurses to care for her around the clock. With Danielle's brilliant legal help, the state awarded me a massive special victims compensation fund from the seized assets. Instead of hiding, I decided to bloom again. Justin, who had become my absolute closest friend and steady protector, helped me paint the walls of my brand new, bright downtown floral and art studio. The smell of fresh, sunny yellow paint mixed beautifully with the scent of blooming pink lilies and rich, dark soil. I walked over to the large front display window. I carefully set down the tiny terracotta pot holding the survivor orchid we had pulled from the burnt greenhouse ashes. It had grown 3 new, vibrant green leaves. "It looks perfect right there," Justin said, wiping a smudge of yellow paint off his forehead with a warm, genuine smile. I smiled back, feeling truly happy and safe for the first time in a very long year. My family had tried to bury me in the dark, but they didn't realize I was a seed. And I was finally growing toward the sun. Later that evening, the shop was quiet. I sat down at my solid oak drafting table in the back. I pulled out a blank sheet of thick, textured watercolor paper and my favorite set of fine-tip pens. I looked over at the front window. The little survivor orchid was glowing beautifully under the soft moonlight. It had completely healed, growing tall and strong. My inner voice was completely calm now. My mother tried to burn my entire world to the ground just to collect an estate check. She thought I was just a weak, foolish girl who would silently take the blame. She was wrong. The terrifying fire took my old greenhouse, but it also burned away the toxic lies I had been living in. It burned away the heavy, suffocating mask of a perfect family and showed me the ugly truth underneath. If you are ever trapped in a dark place by the people who are supposed to love you the most, remember this. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to protect your own peace. Blood does not automatically make someone a good person. Love is an action, not just a biological label. I finished my painting of the orchid and signed my name at the very bottom. My signature was smooth, steady, and perfectly my own. No forged hesitation marks, no shaking lines. I am Eleanor Cooper. I am a survivor, a protector, and a botanical artist. My parents tried to bury me in the dark ashes, but today, surrounded by the people who truly love me, I am finally in full bloom. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. If this story helped you feel less alone tonight, drop a green heart in the comments. If you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who needs to know that true family is about love, not just blood, please share it with them. There are more stories like this one linked in the description. Check them out if you want. I'm Eleanor, and just like that brave little survivor orchid, I'm still standing. And if you're going through something similar, you will bloom too. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next story.